Article 38 would allow basically two family units to go into the R0 and R1 zones, the single family zones in Arlington, and thus it would make those two zones into two family zones. A year ago, Arlington allowed accessory apartments, ADUs, to be put into single family or two family zones. So potentially, we're talking about adding not just two units to the single family zones, we're talking about resulting in 3 or 4 units in our zones. Article 38 was proposed 2 years ago, and it did fail at that time because it did not meet the goal that the proponents said it should do, which was to improve our affordability, to improve our diversity or our housing stock diversity, or to improve our climate resiliency and our open space. Arlington actually has been doing a very good job for communities of its size, of its type, even in the whole state. You probably have heard we are the second most dense town in all of Massachusetts. And I believe we're the 11th most dense community if you include cities, obviously much denser generally than we are. We're the 11th most dense community. We are a diverse town in terms of the housing stock. We have just 39, or if you look at it a slightly different way, 38% of our total housing stock in single family homes. And actually, there are 645 still remaining single family homes in the two family R2 districts. The other thing I would tell you is that, especially during the Black Lives Matter discussions that came out a year or two ago, and since then, there have been a lot of questions about equity and fairness in how communities make housing available to people that aren't as well off as we are, or perhaps people who are retiring, people of color, people on fixed incomes, people even middle or perhaps a little lower middle income. In all these areas, Arlington has been doing a good job. Arlington never had so-called redlining in its zoning laws. Arlington is a place that by its bylaws today is doing the right thing. We have small lot sizes. 5,000 to 6,000 feet is the general size of a lot here. Finally, as you can imagine, not all our houses are maxed out to what could be built on these 5,000 to 6,000 square foot R1 lots. If we put in two family zoning by right in place of single family zoning, there will be a mass movement of developers to buy up the cheapest houses first, and then slowly your house, and then the nicer houses, and then the really nice single family houses, and max out the shape of the new structures. Well, the two family units would be at least as McMansion-y, and the pricing of the units would be much higher than what they replace. Article 38 would have a couple of changes, but I want you to remember they would not have a change to improve affordability. They would not have a change to bringing people who deserve to come but don't have the money otherwise. Those people would be pushed away. The intent of the proponent is housing choice, but every time a single family house in Arlington, every time that house was knocked down to make two family houses, the price always went up of each individual unit. This is a list of recent sales. I believe this goes back several years. This is every single family that's allowed in the two family areas that was knocked down to make the two units you see. And what always happened was that you would have been better off coming into Arlington if you could afford it and buying the single family that was there. The new units individually cost you more or much more than what was there before. There are 12 towns called the Town Manager 12 that are around us. Of those, 10 have lower density than we do. If those 10 with lower density simply went up to Arlington's density by adding units there, and people came to their work or worked in those communities, we would get to the goal that the metro area has to add housing. The unintended consequence on the screen here is that an amendment has been proposed by a member of the ARB to limit the dwelling size, the livable size of these two family units that we're being asked to swallow on the single family zones to, I believe it's 1,850 or possibly 1,875 square feet of living space. And as some of you have already said, and I suspect many of you already live in, houses like yours and mine are often below that, and they're not really that startery. And even if your house is a starter home, good for you for living in it still and having a very cost-effective investment over these years. My house is in the 1,700 range, and As you can imagine, building two of your house on a lot 5,000 to 6,000 feet, even if it's limited to 1850 living feet, is going to make the largest house in your neighborhood that you can imagine. It's not a real limitation. There is now the ability to add in single and two family zones an ADU, a 900 square foot accessory apartment, and the parking for that, and the whole thing, some private space and that sort of thing, I guess, so that we're talking about really enormous structures, even if they are limited to any living size. We're still being asked to swallow two family large structures going in with the people that will come, the effect on services, traffic, our schools, our infrastructure, with the effect of tree loss, the loss of embodied energy by knocking down buildings. A huge amount of waste happens when you see a house torn down that could have been insulated and remodeled. There is a thing called the master plan. The master plan was put together a few years ago, and it's a great document that talks about how Arlington can be great and stay great, how it can be affordable, how it can be a place to age in place, how it can be welcoming to couples and singles, how it can be cool, and how it can also be suburban and have elements of urban with transit and transport. That master plan's implementation committee has voted no action on Article 38. They do not think that this is in keeping with our town's plan for itself.